Right, members, according to my clock, it is now 1:30, so I'd like to reopen the authority meeting and hand over to, there are a selection of members of the public here to speak that I'm sure Andrea will take in accordance with the items against which they feel their comments are relevant. And I will hand over to Andrea Davis to chair the planning. Andrea.
Thank you, Chairman. So we're going to go straight into the planning agenda for the members of the public, and the officer will do the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I'll call you forward on the items you've asked to speak on, and you just sit at the table there, and the microphone is on. And you have 2 minutes, and Judy times you, so you're a little beep if you get out of that. So the first application is agenda item 13.1. That's 635-22-101. Proposed storage of timber and wood chipping operation used in connection with the applicant's existing combined heat and power generating business on land to form part of the parking area. Previously granted planning permission 635-08-101 for the nearby equestrian course. So this is resubmission of the application part retrospective, and it's land adjoining the B3224 at Treba Common. And I'm going to hand over to Dean now.
Thank you very much, Chair. So members will recall you had a debate regarding this application at the Planning Committee in July. There was a healthy discussion about the planning merits of the scheme, and on the conclusion of that debate, I raised a request that the debate be deferred for a later meeting, and that was relating to concerns that we had with regards to the interpretation of the local plan and its policies within that plan. Of particular note was the interpretation of SE S3, and you can see on pages 6 and 7 of the authority papers associated with this report that officers have added a little bit more context in terms of the interpretation of the policies, specifically around the policy relating not just to buildings but also the use of land, which was something that their officers were a little bit concerned at the last meeting that members may have misinterpreted. So this is the third time that members will have sort of sat down to consider this application. I do not intend to go through a detailed presentation of the scheme because of I think that you will all be aware of the proposal. I will run through some slides just to help familiarise ourselves with the site itself, but then I intend to open up to the floor for a continued debate following the discussions that took place in July. So very quickly, as a reminder, the application site, which is at Treba Common, and the slide there shows the area of land which is close to the entrance to the site. An aerial image, again, what you can see is, by the mouse, there's an existing access here with a small track, and those who attended the site visit in July will have seen some piles of logs in approximate location as to where they are shown in the plans themselves. And from that site visit, here are just some photographs of the site. The site itself that would be used to store the logs is more closer to the hedge than you can see the existing piles are here. And these are just photographs showing the site, and just to give it a bit of context, a reminder of the context itself. This is the latest plan that has been submitted. There is an error in the report. I think on the second page it makes reference to an incorrect plan, but for the purposes of the site layout, this is the latest plan that's been submitted. I think the thing to highlight on this plan is the fact that the proposal to plant some trees or specimen trees on the bank on the opposite side of the track have been removed, and now we remain with these areas of planting in this location and in this location here. So that's a reminder of the site. As the Chair stated at the start of the presentation, the application is part retrospective and is seeking the change of use of land for the storage of timber and for a wood chipping operation in connection with the applicant's existing heat and power generating business. I'll leave it there and allow the debate to continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. First forward to speak. You will need to turn the microphone on, Mr. First. Thank you. And can you turn it off at the end? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Timber storage and wood chipping operation is vital to this electricity generating business, operating 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. During the site visit at the generating site, you would have seen the piles of timber which have been produced from hedge laying operation on nearby farms. So there is some benefit to local environment, as this would otherwise be burnt, adding to Exmoor's carbon footprint. The local plan supports increasing the value of Exmoor timber by making fuel, which in this case reduces transport distances, providing employment and contributes to local economy, making the CHP operation sustainable. There is no alternative site. It cannot be carried out on a CHP site because of noise controls imposed by this authority, because of the proximity to nearby houses, and there is also insufficient space. Treeba Common is not open moorland, but is arable land, its appearance changing with crops being grown. There is a lawful right to use a large section of the common, including the application site, as an equestrian course, a business partly funded by this authority. The approved operating manual allows 20 riders every day from March to November, possibly with horse boxes parked here. The proposal seeks an alternative business use being introduced as part of the farm's diversification. The main thrust of policy SE3 is against the construction of new buildings in the countryside. No buildings are proposed, and as such it can be regarded as a soft change of use. If timber storage is no longer required, land can simply be returned to its former condition, as previously described by the landscaping officer as being reversible, even when far more engineering works were intended. The refusal reason refers to the material harm to the landscape character of the common and its historic value. This creates the impression that stored timber will have a significant visual impact from miles around. The landscape officer recognised that the timber storage will only be seen from 160 metres away. Home-produced timber can be stored on this land, so visually, what is the difference between this timber and any other? The land can also be used for 28 days a year for the storage of timber and wood chipping operation. It's asked that planning permission be granted, even for a temporary period of 12 to 15 years. That would be acceptable to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you mind switching off? Thank you. Okay, members, over to you. Fran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I would be abstaining from this, as I wasn't at the previous presentation, and you obviously haven't gone through this fully for me to be able to take part, so I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fran. Mike.
Chair, it's just a question at this stage, if I may. We've just heard, and it was mentioned, I think, at the site inspection, which several of us attended, but we've just heard that the storage cannot be carried out next to the buildings because of noise controls imposed by this authority. Could I just ask for some clarification? Because the same report says, the officer report, there is no documented objection to on-site storage, so I'd just like some clarification. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so my understanding is that there are conditions on an historic planning permission that basically limit the noise, which influences on the ability for the applicant to be able to use the site, particularly around the wood chipping enterprise. As part of the considerations of the proposal and within the report, it talks about us being open to trying to find a site closer to the existing unit, which would then fall within SE S3 in terms of it being more relatable to the existing premises. From an officer's point of view, that we would be happy to explore the likely impacts associated with the wood chipping operation, the frequency of that, and the applicant touches on that within their application in terms of it being not particularly frequent, and there are things to consider that is not for consideration with this application. It's important that members consider it on its merits, but if we were to be considering an alternative site, then obviously officers would be considering the likely impact on local amenity and residential amenity by any additional noise that might be created from a development. So they both are correct in how they've been sort of presented, but they're coming from slightly different perspectives.
John.
Thanks, Chairman. I found this current report far more informative than the previous one, in that it cleared up many of the points that were raised at our previous meeting, which kind of concerned me about, what's a building and what isn't, and so I've been thinking about this one quite a lot, and it seems to still come down to me on the fact that this isn't ancillary to the CHP works. It's a distance from it. It's a development in an isolated rural setting, and it's directly against the policy, which is kind of what we're here to implement, unless there's some material difference, consideration to make us override that. And I cannot, personally, I haven't found any reason that I can see to override that, particularly when hearing the planning officer describe the possibility of alternatives. Not that that is a consideration, because we're just talking about this application here. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Does that have a seconder? Linda? Any more debate, members? Christine?
As you already know, I've spoken several times about this, and I feel very uncomfortable about it, because I do want and hope that we can support businesses across the moor that need to develop. And this is a very typical example to me of how can we, should we, be able to help a business develop. Any business that gets planning permission to start a business would probably have to continue to grow and develop. And this is what I feel this group of people are doing. They're growing their business to develop, like we heard about this morning about trees and growth and forestry. They are doing that in particular importance to them, which is what their livelihood is, to develop it. And I would want to see this flourish. I would want to see it grow. And I just feel very difficult and very uncomfortable at giving them a refusal at this stage.
Thank you, Christine. Francis?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too feel very uncomfortable about this, as you know from what I said last week. In landscape terms, I'm particularly pleased to see that the line of sesame trees has gone. It wouldn't have been suitable in the landscape. That's, I think, a major thing forward. I do think that in landscape terms, it is entirely acceptable in that site, and I would go beyond that and say that when we were discussing the particular policy, which the business and open country, it was, I think, a million miles from any of our minds that a pile of wood, even a large pile of wood, would be covered by this. It was not in our thinking. And there are plenty of them all over the moor where chipping and logging and things go on. I feel very uncomfortable that we are not merely accepting what was the past planning applications, and no, I haven't got all the numbers here, which clearly allowed the combined heat and power plant as farm diversification, and this is in support of farm diversification. I therefore think we should allow it.
Thank you, Francis. Linda?
Thank you. Having been on the site visit, I must admit I wasn't at the previous debate, but I was at the one before that, so I do feel that I can comment and vote on this. To me, the officer recommendation is absolutely clear, and it's clearly correct. By refusing this application, we are not preventing this person expanding, and I do think it's an amazing business. It's a really great business, having been privileged to be taken around the generating plant. It's fantastic. I know it's not part of this application, but there is a considerable amount of space in and around. Those of us who came back in the minibus went through quite a large area where there's old plants stored. We wouldn't be finishing off this business. We would not be not allowing him to expand. There is room to do this on other sites, and another application, I'm sure, could be welcomed in a better position.
Thank you, Linda. Mike?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Interesting points have been made. It is finely balanced if you look at it in one sense, but if you apply the logic of decision making, and legislation, as we know, requires us to make a decision in accordance with the provisions of the development plan. That's legislation, that's not a discretionary duty on us. And having visited the site and looked at the planning history, I think, I have to say, John put it very well. I think it is clearly contrary to policy. Policy does need to be read in the round. We've got to look at all the relevant policies. The agenda report is very helpful. This particular report sets out that consideration. It is clearly contrary to the relevant policies that have been identified. We have an objection from the landscape officer. We have an objection from the historic environment officer. And the planning officer, not unreasonably, has taken that into account. That is the starting point for the decision. And weighed against it are these other considerations. But I don't think, as has been said, it's going to necessarily prejudice the business. There will be other opportunities. And, you know, if you look at the practicalities of this, we've got, if you look at the report, the wood chip machine will be there every 3 to 4 weeks for 4 to 5 hours only. Whereas the actual timber storage will be there 10, 15 years when it was permanent use of that land. So we've got to look at the practicalities as well. So I think on the basis of all the considerations that have been looked at and having looked at it on site, it's very clear in terms of that decision-making process, it is contrary to policy. Are there any material considerations that indicate a decision other than in accord with policy? And having looked at this and listened to the discussion this afternoon, I don't think there are, and I would support the recommendation to refuse the application in accordance with the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nick?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I'm all for approving this. One of the things that we talk about in Exmoor is to encourage local businesses. And here's a very good example of us doing the opposite to what we've said we would do previously. So I'm sorry, but I sort of, contrary to other people's discussion, I feel that we need to encourage local businesses, because if we don't, there won't be a national park soon. Thank you.
Vivian?
Thank you, Chairman. I believe in the end that the officer's recommendation rests upon landscape harm. These things are a matter of judgment. We went on a site visit which was effectively, therefore, our opportunity to bear witness to whether there was or wasn't any landscape harm. My judgment was that there wasn't any landscape harm. You had to look very, very, very hard to find a place where you could see this log store from. In the wider landscape, it would be completely invisible. That was my judgment then. It's my judgment now. I've heard nothing from the planning officers which dissuades me from the evidence of my own eyes.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands raised. No, you've all gone very quiet. So we do have a proposer and a seconder for refusal. So I would like to ask you, all those that support that, would you please raise their hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And against? 6. Therefore, it is refused. And, oh, abstentions. So that was us, 3 of us. I wasn't here last time either. Francis. 5. You're not abstaining, you voted. I had a question, sorry. I didn't hear what the votes were. 7-4. Yeah, 7-6. And 4 of us had to abstain.
Check on that, because I wasn't here at the July meeting, but we talked about it in June, so that's okay. I mean, I feel
well, my personal feeling is because Fran has now said she wasn't here last time, I'm going to have to do the same.
Point, so maybe I think I probably shouldn't.
It's a difficult one. Hayes is not here to ask.
Sorry, I was a bit hasty.
Okay, what we will do is defer and ask the solicitor, because
Yeah.
unfortunately, Fran, because you said that, I would have normally voted, but because you said that, I didn't feel I could vote.
And apologies, I was absent in July.
I was
but
absent in July. Yeah.
been here in June, so I wasn't familiar.
So can we please make a call to Hazel? Sorry, Hazel's our solicitor, who looks after all the legal aspects. Unfortunately, she couldn't get here because her car's broken down. Fran, at the beginning of the meeting, I'm going to let Dean go and make the call. Okay, we have a decision, which is not as straightforward. Neither. Okay, we're going to remember we're in a meeting now, and Dean is going to tell us what the solicitor said, which isn't straightforward.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, having taken some advice and looking at the standing orders, the relevant section is section 16, which deals with the rescission of a previous resolution. So, obviously, as an authority, the vote took place and you have, in effect, taken a decision. But in the circumstances such as this, and I'll read it out word for word to be clear, it says, no motion to rescind or reverse any substantive resolution passed by the authority within the preceding 6 months, and no motion or amendment to the same effect as one which has been rejected within preceding 6 months shall be proposed unless notice thereof in pursuance of Standing Order 9.3 bears the name of at least 6 members of the authority. When the authority has disposed of any such motion or amendment, it shall not be open to any member to propose a similar motion within a further 6-month period. What that basically means is the decision is the decision. However, if there are feelings within the room that there needs to be a further consideration of it in light of some of the confusion, if 6 members write to the Chief Executive requesting such a motion, then it can be brought back to the next meeting to be considered. Now, what I can do is say that from an officer point of view, we will not issue a decision for the moment. We won't issue a refusal to allow for a period of time for members to decide whether that's what they want to do. But unfortunately, there's nothing more we can do today.
Okay. Susan.
So does that, I just might not have understood the legal terminology there, but I'm wondering, does that actually answer the question for me was whether my vote can, whether I can vote or I need to abstain because I missed the July meeting. So is that, can you answer that for me? Because that seems to be the crux of it, and for Andrea as well.
Yep. So the advice is that providing that all the papers in terms of the report that's before you have been read, that you feel comfortable enough that you're familiar with the site and that you've understood all of the considerations, then it would be open to members to vote.
Right.
Yes.
That's the end of the matter.
Except we voted sort of unaware of the situation. So we're saying we've discounted people voting on the basis of, as we understood it at the time. In fact, as it turns out, they could have voted.
No.
In Susan's case, that isn't the case.
No, I did vote, and then I went, oh, maybe I should have abstained. So I did actually vote.
But in your case, you have expressed in the meeting that you abstained because of that reason. That is material, I think.
And if the reason is invalid.
Okay, well, we can't change it anyway. So as I've just said to you, as the kids would say, we don't need to get too deep here because we can't change it. We've had a vote. So at the moment, the application is refused. But if 6 people, so this could be any application that comes up at any point, if 6 people want to write to Miss Bryan to express that opinion, then they can. I'm sorry, I don't normally ask the agent if they're clear about what's happening. Dean will come and explain to you later. Is that all right, Dean? We need to move to the next item. because this is, we're just going on and on and on. It was a procedural matter where we actually, I think many of us have learnt something now that 6 people can write about a decision. I did not know that before.
So that then they can
Can I just ask a question? I've been a nuisance, but I just want to ask, I'm asking Dean really, or officer, for the benefit of those who felt unable to vote. Generally speaking, I think we can expect that those sat at the planning meeting would have had in front of them all the information they need to take that decision. And I think we absolutely did. It was an upgraded version of the reports. We had our report from our site visit, so you don't need to be on the site visit. You've got the site visit report. So very rarely are we all at a site visit. So I do believe that you had all the information, provided you were comfortable that you read it. You were perfectly entitled to take a decision. Perfectly entitled to abstain as well, Chairman.
We are moving on. I've made a decision. Right. Sorry about that. It was all very confusing. I'll never be doing this again, I can tell. Right, item 13.2, which is application 627-22-103, is proposed change of use from land from woodland forestry to domestic, together with the erection of a summer house and formation of parking, and this is also part retrospective. So, Dean, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As was just outlined, this is a part retrospective application for the change of use of land from a woodland to a domestic use, together with the erection of a summer house and formation of a parking bay. I do have quite a few aerial images and photographs, so I'm going to go through those relatively quickly just to give a bit of an understanding and context for the site. So here's an aerial image of the application site, which is known as Brackham Wood. You can see here is the main property as it sits within the plot. The area of land that we are talking about is roughly this area of land here in terms of its change of use. The parking bay that has been put in is approximately in this location here, with a summer house put up next to the house at a higher level. There is an existing garage in this location here, with existing off-street parking in this location. This is just a location plan that's submitted with the application, just showing it in context with Tour Road. And this shows a proposed layout as is at the moment. In terms of the area of land that we're looking at in terms of what forms part of the change of use, it's approximately this area of land here, and measures about 20 metres wide at its widest. I think it's about 75 metres long along here. Plans just showing the summer house that's to be retained with the lean-to log store to the side. See, it's about 4.9 metres wide by 2.9 metres deep, and height of about 2.9 metres. And the proposed parking bay with a maximum height of the wall of about just over 2 metres. It is currently render, but the proposal does seek to introduce stone facing if members were minded to approve the application. So this is a bit more of an historic aerial image, just showing the site in context before the proposed works have been carried out. The area to the side of the property that is seek of the change of use forms part of a local wildlife site, and this is a comparison between a more recent aerial image between the two sites. So here's the property, and if I just flip between the two existing property, you can see there's some mature trees and some trees here that have been removed. This again just shows the area in sort of the pinky red is the local wildlife site. The green is the area where the historic domestic curtilage is, as understood by Land Registry, and it's this area of land that has been subject to the planning application. I've got for you some street views dating back to 2009, again just to help with the previous context for the site. The existing parking area is here, the property is an elevated location, and you can see the planting around. Again, this is taken close to the existing parking area, and the area which is subject to the lay-by is in this location here. And this is again just taken further along the street, just showing the previous context of the site. This is just past the site, looking back towards Brackenwood along Toll Road, and you can see the existing vegetation. And the next series of photographs shows this is the summer house which is proposed to be retained, which is to the side of the property. There's also an existing single shed. You can see an area of hard standing with sort of gravelled hard stand. And this is a photo looking back towards the property. You see a patioed area. You can start to see some of the removal of trees and vegetation around the site. So again, just for context, just to show it in its surroundings. This is to the back, just to show the sloping nature of the site. Again, you can start seeing evidence of tree stumps in the area. And a further photograph of the summer house again. This is taken from behind again, just showing the context with the existing residential property. And I'm struggling to see that on my screen. There we are, a further photograph of the summer house, and again just showing some of the removal of the vegetation. And again, the next couple of slides just illustrate that in terms of the works that have been done. So hopefully this gives context for the site itself. So this is back down to the toll road, Worthy Toll Road. You can see this is the parking bay that's proposed to be retained. As I said at the start of the presentation, the proposal seeks to potentially stone face the wall to try and simulate it into the street scene a little bit better. You'll note from the parish council comments there was concern with regards to the inclusion of these bollards, and a request that maybe these are removed and replaced with a more natural material. And again, just to show it in context as it is today. This again shows the existing car parking on the site in excess of the parking bay. You can see that it easily accommodates 2 vehicles. There is also a garage there that would mean that, in terms of the parking provision for the property, that it meets the highway standards for parking. And so therefore, you know, in the report officers talk around that it's not contributing to a required need for off-street parking, and therefore, in terms of any benefit, it's considered that the harm caused to the local wildlife site is not outweighed by any positive sort of addition of parking provision. And again, just to show it in the context of what it's like today in terms of a street scene. You can see from the officer's report on page, get to the right page, 32 and 33, there are 4 reasons for refusal relating to the detrimental impact and loss of the local wildlife site and ancient woodland at Worthy Wood, both important biodiversity habitats. The materials, the siting and the design of the summer house fails to complement or respect the existing natural landscape character, that the maximum parking provision for the size of the dwelling at site has already been met, and the final one is
is paraphrased by the reason of its design, material and site in the parking bay fails to complement or respect the existing natural landscape character of the site, again of the local wildlife site in Nation Woodland. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we do have the applicant, Mr. Fair. Did you want to come forward and speak? Would you mind switching on the microphone, please?
Right, let me get a paper. Okay. Is that okay? Yes. Right, the reason we located the cabin in the position it now stands is this area was used by the previous owners who lived there for 25 years as part of their garden. There was a washing line, small shed, and an area of slabbing, which is where we placed the cabin, and there's also a boundary fence which is still there. After checking on the planning portal for the required regulations to site a cabin in position, I determined that no planning permission was needed. However, I did not realise that the planning rules were different in the Exmoor National Parks, and we actually needed permission to site the cabin at the side of the property. Apparently speaking to one of your officers, I could site it behind the property, no problem. No trees were removed by us to site the cabin. All further tree work was carried out on the advice of Sheasby Tree Services for safety and general good housing reasons. This work would have been carried out even if we hadn't put a cabin there, or just basically on the advice of Sheasby because they were near the house, etc. What we now have is a cabin with a stoned area in front. In total, it's only 35 square metres. That's the cabin and the stoned area. The area is in abundance with wildlife, pheasants, woodpeckers and many other species of birds and animals which are all attracted by the feeders which we have placed around the cabin. With regards to the parking area, this area was cleared in an attempt to locate and repair our water main. The water board was only able to give us rough position on the main. It was obvious during the excavation that this area was of made up ground, and we had to remove more soil than we had hoped to actually find the water pipe. After location and repair of the main, we were left with a fairly large area which, considering the difficulty and lack of parking in the area, we considered would make a suitable addition to the available parking. This area is only covered in rough low vegetation, no trees, etc. The total area of the parking bay is 14 square metres. So in summary, the total area of land is of the cabin and the parking is less than 50 square metres. No trees were removed to facilitate any of these works, only deemed necessary by qualified tree surgeons has been carried out. What we have is extra safe parking, a cabin which obviously benefits us, but has also created extra habitat for various wildlife. We have the support of the local parish council who know the local area. I am more than willing, if you feel necessary as part of the planning, to plant trees, etc., although the area around the cabin is already largely covered in some form of plant life, which again attracts a lot of wildlife, bees, birds, stuff like that. If you feel a site visit would be beneficial, then please arrange one as necessary. Thanks for taking time.
Thank you. Would you mind turning off?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Right, members. Mike.
I didn't want to speak first necessarily, Chair, but there's three elements to this. There's the change of use of the land, which I think I'm probably more concerned about, particularly land to the rear, and we've got the summer house and the parking bay. Again, just for point of clarification, Mr. Kinsella, could we just have a very clear idea of what the present situation on site is, what we're looking at as it is now? Because I'm interested in what woodland coverage we have at the back of the site.
So in terms of comparing this aerial image to what is currently on site, this is the area of sort of gravelled area where the summer house has been erected. On this aerial image it doesn't show, from what I can tell, the parking bay that has been implemented, and it's difficult to tell, if I'm being really honest with you, in terms of this shows the canopy cover, but it doesn't show in terms of the removal of trees. I mean, obviously the applicant has today explained that works were carried out, and that was for safety reasons in terms of their proximity to the house, but I couldn't tell you whether this demonstrates that. This dates back to I think by 2017, so I would suggest it has changed since then, bearing in mind the investigations that we've been having on this site were after that date.
no one's got any, if no one else is saying anything,
Jeremy's about to.
right, I'm quite happy to wait until they've had something to say.
A question, Chairman. The land, the tree cover land at the back, is that in the ownership of the applicant, or is it outside the ownership?
It's understood during the course of the discussions with the owner that the ownership in this area, and it is approximate, but in approximately this area, fell outside of the ownership of the applicant. And they have been in discussions with the landowner, and I think I'm right in saying that there has been an agreement that the owners can use the land. They don't own it, but they can use it for the purposes of added domestic curtilage, subject obviously to planning permission being approved.
Yes, please come back.
So the responsibility for removing the tree cover in the wildlife site, local wildlife site, may not be that of the applicant, but of someone else. I just want to clarify who's responsible for what, and whether we should be considering that at the moment or not.
I think in terms of considering this application, it's purely on its planning merits. We don't get involved in land ownership. If in the event that the application is refused, for example, and we have to go ahead and issue enforcement notices, then everybody with a legal interest in the land would form part of that. So the landowner would also be served on it and would have equal responsibility as would the person who necessarily carries out the work.
Thank you. John.
Just another question, actually. One of the previous slides showed what I took to be a picture of what was the woodland behind the house, but it seemed in the picture to be quite closely filled. Back a bit? Oh. No, there was more. There was another one. There, that one. Now, I took that to effectively mean that much of the canopy behind the house had gone. Have I misinterpreted it?
No, I don't think you have. I mean, there's the property there. This is the side of the summer house that's proposed. This is the bank, and you can see the stumps of the trees. So there would have been large amounts. What I can't categorically say to you members is that to what extent that has differed from the canopy. Sorry, I will get there in a minute. From the canopy that is shown on the aerial images. So I couldn't tell you exactly whether the canopy is now here, or it's as it is there.
Thank you, Susan.
You may or may not be able to answer this. It was just reference to the applicant's words around the rationale for removal of trees. Obviously, reading the report, concern about loss of trees from a local wildlife site. The suggestion that work was done in terms of safety. Do we know if that any of that background? Because obviously that does shed slightly different light on the removal of the trees than perhaps one might first think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they would have needed consent for the works to the trees and the woodland anyway, and that would have been the opportunity that we would have had to consider whether there was a genuine safety reason or not. I would suggest it's not something that is particularly material consideration for you. Think about it.
Robin. I'm afraid you can't. Sorry.
Just a question, really, to Dean, I think, that should the application be refused and enforcement take place, how do you go about enforcing an instant tree?
Oh.
I'm just not quite sure. Would you enforce it back?
I mean, in the same way that we would normally look if there was unauthorised works to a tree that had a tree preservation order upon it, you would expect to see a replacement of a similar species in a location that was approved. So there would be a need for a clear strategy for replanting that area. That would have to come from us as the planning authority to tell the landowner what we are expecting.
Jeremy's next.
Thank you. I hope this doesn't complicate matters. It says in the officer's report that the ownership of the land is not an issue and we shouldn't worry about it. However, it suggests that there has been a dialogue between the applicant and the actual landowner. What I want to know is, has the relevant notice of a planning application been served on to the landowner, and if it hasn't, why was this application validified?
Dean, that's your one again.
Yes, it has, yeah.
Mike, I have seen you've indicated, but as you've already spoken, I'm going to ask Francis first.
A quick look at the application and saw the notice to the landowner. My question is, in planning terms, can Dean tell us about whether it makes any difference as to whether the applicant felled the trees or whether somebody else did before he ever owned any of the stuff that he now owned?
Dean?
No, is the simple answer. Whoever has an interest at a given time will have responsibility to rectify any breach of planning. So it will be, as I said, it will be the landowner and anybody else who has been involved or has an interest in that land.
Okay. So and just to be clear, if in the land that is in the applicant's ownership, not the land that isn't, presumably the land that he bought from somebody else. If the somebody else cut the trees down on the land that the applicant now owns, it would fall to the applicant to put it right, if we so required. Well, no, there seems to be two patches of land. A patch of land that's owned by the applicant and another patch of land which is owned by Mark Blathwaite. Is that right?
So to clarify, our understanding is approximately this area of land here is owned by the current applicant, and that has been the residential curtilage of the property, including the property itself. It is this approximate area here which, on reflection, wasn't owned by the applicant, and I understand is still owned by somebody else, but there is an agreement that they can use it. So both of those parties, any enforcement on this parcel of land, the landowner and anybody else with an interest would be responsible and served upon in terms of enforcement notice. Who does the works is frankly between them.
Okay, so are we, if I may, just because my brain isn't functioning clearly, we appear to have been looking at photographs of felled trees in the area behind the house. That appears to be what perhaps is in the curtilage of the house, but doesn't appear from what you've said to be what we're concerned about. Because when particularly the photograph which looked behind the house and showed loads of felled trees or loads of stumps, is that an area? Yeah, we've just gone past it. That one. That one. Now, we appear to be looking behind the house, are we, or not?
No, we're not. So the house is here, so that's there. This is behind the summer house, which, if I very quickly, I've gone the wrong way again, I think. No, I did. I was going the right way to start with. If I come here, we were basically, that photograph was taken approximately in this location here, looking across. So you're sort of at the very edge or just outside of the site.
None of the bit that we're discussing at the moment is in the ownership of the applicant. Is that what we're saying?
Well, yes. I mean, the area that we're particularly interested in is not in the ownership of the applicant. Yes.
And what we're discussing is the change of use. Right, so hang on, I've got a list. Linda's next, then Christine, then Mike.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of get away from the complications and go back to first principles. I've been here almost 10 years, and this is the first time I've seen such a strong comment from our wildlife officer. It's clearly breaching the local wildlife site principles. It's clearly done damage to ancient woodland. It's the importance of trees in that particular part of Exmoor and that conservation area is incredibly high, and the Historic Buildings Officer has got concerns because it's in a protected conservation area. So I can absolutely see no case for approving this at all, and I would like to move the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Dominic. So next on my list is Christine.
Unsure about whether some of the trees were felled for safety reasons or whether it's just aesthetic reasons. I know it doesn't matter to you, it matters to me. So I just want to understand the situation with this building placed in partial woodland, and was it a danger, and whose responsibility would it have been if one of them had fallen down?
Dean.
Probably nothing to do with it, but I just need to understand.
I think what's really important, and what it's really important you consider, is not necessarily the merits or otherwise for the removal of the trees. It's whether, as part of the proposal that is before us, whether the loss of those trees and habitat, whether that is harmful or not. You've got the comments by the ecologists who have set out their views that there is real harm that's been caused by the proposal. There would have been mechanisms for any landowner, whoever is responsible at any given time, to have sought advice to whether they needed consent or not. So your officer report sets out the harm that we believe that has been caused by that. We've then, as you would expect, considered the planning policies relevant to the proposal and considered that there isn't any policy reason why would lead us to approving the application in this instance, and then there are no material considerations that would lead us to go against our policies. That's the thought process that you need to take, rather than concerning yourself as to whether there is an excuse for doing what they've done. Whether it's the right thing or not isn't necessarily for a discussion in terms of the specific trees. It's whether what is now in place is an acceptable form of development.
Okay, thank you.
Mike.
Chair, that's a very good answer. And I was simply going to say, it doesn't really matter whether the applicant owns the land or doesn't own the land, providing appropriate notice has been served. So procedurally, I'm not worried about that particular aspect. I think Linda's point very clear. We should not be condoning any adverse impact on local wildlife sites. This is an area of ancient semi-natural woodland as well, so the ecologist's concerns are well founded. I would support the recommendation to refuse the application.
Thank you. Dominic, did you want to say anything as the seconder? Thank you. I have no more hands raised. There we go. Well, we're going to go to the vote. So proposed by Linda and seconded by Dominic that we go with the officer's recommendation of refusal. All those in support of that, could you please raise your hands? And myself as well, so it is unanimous. Thank you very much. No abstentions. I'd missed, and nobody did. That's unanimous. Yes, so we need to get Mr. Milne back in because he had to leave the room because he lives nearby. And Judy's going to have to leave because she's actually near to the next application.
And she's trusting me.
So Robin's now going to be in charge of the timer. It's all a bit. Great. While we're waiting, we have had tabled a piece of information about the next application. So while everybody's settling down, can I just remind you that you've had this to read? So we're all sorted. You're okay now, Dean. So it's the final application of today, and it's item 3.3. This is application 6922-107, proposed conversion of existing garage to habitable room at Castle Barn, Bridge Street, Dulverton. We've got two speakers, I understand, although I don't know, perhaps only one. Thank you. So at the end, you'll see what happens at the end of the presentation, then I'll call you forward. Thank you. Dean, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is situated within Dulverton, not too far from where we are at the moment. This very large-scale location plan shows by a little red dot the sort of location. The authority offices are here. The application site is here down a little single width lane. This aerial image shows it in a bit more detail. So here is the bridge opposite the council offices, and this is the road towards Exmoor House. You've got the public house here, and you've got a narrow drive leading to a number of properties along here, and you see the area identified in red. This again just shows it in its context in a bit more detail. In terms of elevations, these are existing elevations I'm going to show you now. So this is an existing side. This small lean-to roof is projected forward of the property, which you see in some photographs shortly, and is part of the proposal, so part of the existing garage. This shows the existing front elevation with the garage located here that is to be converted. A floor plan. You will note by the comments that have been written by the agent, it makes reference to the existing garage, and in particular the existing garage measures approximately 5.2 metres long internal and has a width of approximately 3.15 metres. That reduces to 2.45 metres over its length and approximately 1.5 metres. Whilst the length of the garage is less than recommended length of the garage, it has room to accommodate a car. That's what the report states. The width of the garage door is 2.2 metres. It would be possible to drive a vehicle into the garage. However, once parked, it would be difficult to open the vehicle door and then manoeuvre out of the garage between the vehicles and the restricted garage door width. So the concern is the width area here, that it wouldn't be particularly easy to manoeuvre a vehicle, and it's understood following discussions with the applicant that the garage isn't currently used for parking of their vehicle. So this shows the proposed elevation. So you can see the existing timber cladding removed, a window inserted into the side elevation, and the existing opening removed with rendered finished and timber window proposed to match the existing. And this shows the floor area within the dwelling, so an access into what would be shown as here as a living room. So just some photographs to show the site and to provide a bit of context. You can see a trailer is currently in. You can see how, based on the floor plans, just behind this lean-to entrance porch area, the garage then extends wide, but it does give you some context in terms of the width of the opening with the trailer in position. And this again is taken from the front of the property, showing the existing outside area. Further photographs taken from the lane with the back to the main high street of Dorverton behind us. You can see from the officer report on page well, it says 44 on the very end, and then there is a single reason for refusal, and that is related to the application site is likely to be in demand for car parking. This can currently be accommodated at the site and within the garage. The proposal would lead to a reduction in the space available for the parking of vehicles within the site. The applicant has not provided information to assess why this may be acceptable in this case, and the proposal would fail to provide sufficient off-street parking spaces. The proposal is therefore considered contrary to policy ACD3 of the local plan and the standing advice of Somerset County Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to come forward, and would you turn on the microphone, please? And Robin, you're in charge of the device.
This application refers to our garage, which is incorporated in a property we recently purchased and is unfortunately not fit for purpose. A comprehensive 7-page report provided by the ENPA Planning Authority seems obvious that the only issue here is the loss of parking space. Hopefully this problem we have currently resolved. So my first question would have been, so I asked why we went through the process of planning and did the initial pre-app. The reply that came back that everything was favourable. So I would really ask, why wasn't this issue flagged up at that time, which would have probably influenced us on any of the decision. Continuing with the process, on Wednesday, the 20th of July, I contacted the ENPA for a decision date. I was given today's date, August the 2nd. Thursday, July the 21st, I received an email from Joe White, the case officer, via Roger Hammond, our agent, stating refusal was recommended because of the loss of parking. This was the first occasion that this had been mentioned, so I would again ask, why was this discussed and disclosed during the planning progress? We get the information apparently 7 working days before this decision date. I have confirmed that a parking space can be created outside of our property and will be if the application is accepted within the curtilage, merely by removing a slated platform and also the front step. A letter from Richard Hammond, our agent, was clarified this in a report dated the 27th of the 7th, 22nd, to also confirm this. Also, this proposal would not affect traffic going to and fro Castle Cottages further up the lane. This application would improve our flood assessment 100%, rating the floor with the blockwork construction to finish. And in this report, it repeatedly makes an issue of the loss of a parking space with no explanation as to why this is acceptable. We have dealt with the issue and confirmed that we will provide a parking space after this report came out. Unfortunately, with regard to the case officer, during the whole time of this process, I never met Joe White, although I did try on 3 occasions to telephone him.
Thank you, Mr. Cleve. Mr. Cleve, Mr. Kinsella will get back to you about the process you've been through, because obviously he'll have to look into that. He won't know the details at the moment. It wasn't him, but he will get back to you about that. Members, over to you about the actual application. Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick couple of questions, really. Is that my understanding is that the part that is actually owned, so the garage is effectively removed. Hang on. So the part in front of the garage that exists currently is space enough for a car to be parked. Is that correct?
Yeah, you will see by the additional statement that I think towards the end it says the applicant has confirmed that he does own the area of land marked in blue on the attached block plan, which is at the back, and he said that which would allow a parking space in place of the garage, which is therefore a no worsening situation. So the additional information is basically stating that they could provide that car parking space and it would be no worse than what it currently is.
Just come back on that, because it says in the document, it says the applicant does not want to use the garden space, which I assume that is the garden space. Is it in front?
No, it's a different area. If you...
I can't...
The garden area they're talking about is this bit here.
Where is the garden area, sorry?
This bit where my mouse is. There.
Okay, it's not... Oh, it is shown on here, sorry, yes. Okay, thank you. And the other question, it says, it talks about... talks about visiting. Is it a second house, I suppose, is the question, second property?
I think that's irrelevant, so we'll move on. Dominic.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the presentation, really helpful, very clear, and thank you also for your remarks on behalf of the applicant and this additional information, which has been really useful. The key, the fact that, this is about the loss of the parking space, that is the reason given for the refusal of this, and I think a couple of things to note there. One is on the issue of the issues about flood resilience is taken. Also, the issue of climate change. By converting this garage, it will make the house better insulated, better performing. These old garages are a bit of an anachronism for a time when cars were a very different size. Now, this is acknowledged. The report says the length of the garage is less than the recommended length of a garage. Therefore, for all purposes for us, you can't regard it as a garage. If it's less than the recommended length, it isn't suitable for modern vehicles. It isn't currently used as a garage. It hasn't been for a very long time. It should be discounted. It's a storage space. It's not a garage. So I think I would move to actually very rarely go against the officer's recommendation on this one. I would move to approve this application, and I would do so on the basis that actually we discount this reference to the garage on the basis that it's not a real garage in the sense that is meant by the Somerset County Council standing advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Oh my goodness, everybody. Let's go with Mike.
Yes, I would like to second that.
Thank you.
I would like to second the recommendation that we approve this application. Thank you.
Any further comments from anybody? Linda?
Could we condition it that that parking place is provided as part of any recommendation to approve? Thank you.
Any more discussion?
No, I think, Chair, I don't think we can really look, given the constraints of the existing garage, it's not functioning as a garage, so I think we've got good reason to arrive at a contrary view. I think it makes a great deal of sense, so I would support the resolution.
I can't see any more hands, so can we move to the vote, please? Conditions. So the one condition we want is that the parking space that's been indicated by the applicant outside remains as a parking space. Anything else you suggest?
I was going to recommend, Chair, through you, that there's obviously the time limit and the accorded plans conditions. There probably needs to be a condition around flood risk, just ensuring that the finished floor level does match that of the existing property, and has been highlighted already the provision of the parking space.
Are we all happy with those? Yeah, thank you. Right, we're going to move to the vote. So it's been proposed by Dominic and seconded by Mike, and that is that we approve this application. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you. Right, I'm reconvening the meeting, and we are now on item 14, which is the delegated decisions. Dean, I'm going to go through it, as Stephen always does, each page, and then you'll have to quickly put your hand up and make sure I notice you if you've got anything to say. Yes, you may.
It might be worthwhile me just very quickly going through them and picking out some of the highlights, so to speak. So you can see that in total there's about 38 decisions. Unfortunately, it seemed to have picked up a few of the decisions that were made at last committee. So in total there's 34. Of those, the vast majority resulted in positive decisions. So 30 out of the 34, which is about 88% in terms of the positive decisions. Just picking up a couple of the cases where we might have had to have refused an application. On page 5, there is the application at St Luke's Roadwater. It was for a proposal for a live-work unit. Unfortunately, we couldn't secure the Section 106 needed in terms of the local needs affordable housing element, so we weren't able to support that application. You can see it's a resubmission of a previous application that was also refused, so it will be for the applicant to decide how they want to take that forward, whether they wish to go to appeal or not. So we'll watch that with interest. I did think on page 3 it's probably also just worth picking up the WTPO 2203, which is third from bottom at the Tors Park. That was a split decision. I thought it's worth just explaining the reason behind that. primarily in that some of the works were related for arboricultural reasons and we had no objections to those works. Some of the works were related to the sort of the views and the enjoyment of the surrounding amenity of the potential occupants. We've had ongoing discussions around a landscape scheme for the site that was holistic and looked at the whole site as a whole. We haven't been able to secure that yet, and it just felt inappropriate for us to be making a positive decision around that at this time. So we took the decision to have a split decision to allow some of the safety works to take place, because it was to do with health and safety, but more of the amenity works we've asked for maybe to be considered as part of a wider landscape plan. On page 2, there's safe view, which is a refusal. The proposal was to remove a agricultural occupancy condition. Basically, the application didn't fulfil the requirement to justify that there was no longer a need for that condition, and nor was it presented in a way that would allow it to be secured as a local needs affordable property. So that was refused, and we wait to see whether the applicant chooses to appeal or resubmit. That's the headlines. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly go through if anybody wants to pick any up. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. And there's one on page 6. Excellent. There are no site visits, so you can release the 2nd of September. I'd like to wish you all a very safe onward journey, and I do hope that you have a very good evening, and I won't be here at the next meeting because I deferred my holiday from this meeting to the next meeting so Stephen could go on holiday. I hope you will enjoy the September meeting.